Welcome to Just the Two of Us Homestead. We are Colleen and Frank, and we live in the perfect size homestead just for us in southwestern Quebec. Gardening, growing food, and preserving is one of our passions. And our barn animals, we love them so much, they're just like pets. And we're so fortunate to be able to live our lives as we do. Each and every day is a blessing. Hi, everyone. Today I'm going to try a new recipe for canning. Every summer or canning season, I like to try a new recipe, and it usually depends on what I have in surplus. All my canning needs are met for this season, and last year I had a huge abundance of tomatoes. So last summer I tried a bunch of new tomato recipes. Well, right now we have a huge abundance of peppers. So today I'm going to try a stuffed green pepper soup, but it's unstuffed because they're not going to be stuffed peppers in the soup. And this is just part of them. The garden is still full. So we're going to use up a bunch of peppers. I'm going to use up a bunch of tomatoes, and I still have more after this from the garden. They're almost finished. And homemade beef stock and onions and just a few other things to make it safe for canning, seasonings and herbs. And that's it. So the first thing I'm going to do is fry up. I have 2 pounds of extra lean ground beef. In Quebec, it's called extra lean. Extra lean. I know in the US and Australia and different places, you have like numbers you put to it, like 80-20 or whatever. We just call it extra lean. You could use ground chicken, ground turkey, or whatever. I'm just using extra lean ground beef. So I'm going to fry that up. I've already I kind of like blanched the tomatoes to get the skins off, and I'm going to chop them off. So I'm just going to ground my ground beef, wash up my peppers that I need, and then I'll get chopping and explain the recipe to you. I'm going to do it in my roaster because I'm going to need some of my burners for other things, and it just frees up the space once the canner's on there. And I'll meet you back here in just a minute when everything is all set up. We need 8 cups of chopped sweet peppers. So what I'm going to do is, we aren't, especially me, I'm not a big fan of green pepper. That's why we grow so many, or why we grow Cubanelle. I didn't want to grow that many. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to chop up red pepper, Cubanelle, a few of these. I want all the flavors and all the colors. So I'm going to deseed them all first. Then I'm going to use my chopper. And you guys don't need to see all of that. I just wanted to explain to you why I chose this recipe in particular. Because I looked for a bunch of different recipes for canning, not just a unstuffed pepper soup. I wanted one that used like the raw vegetables, like the tomatoes in their raw form, and the peppers. Well, you don't really can peppers, but because many of the recipes I came across said to use like 2 cans of tomato sauce or a can of diced tomatoes and stuff like that. Well, I didn't want that. I wanted to use the tomatoes how they are and to use them up. And I didn't want to have to use my canned stuff. I wanted everything in its raw form. So I found this recipe where it's using everything as it is. So I found that to be perfect. And then I was going to half the recipe, because usually when I make something for the first time, this is going to make 8 quarts or 15 to 16 pints. And I thought, wow, if we don't like it, that's a lot of food. But I mean, how bad can it be? We love stuffed peppers. I love everything that's going into it. and I have a lot of peppers to use up. So we're going for the whole thing. So I'm going to chop up 8 cups. And then I've measured out my tomatoes. The only thing that's not from our garden is the onions. These are from Aldi. They're organic. After I chop up all the peppers, then we'll chop up the tomatoes and onions. Everything goes in the roaster, and it just cooks for a bit, and then you can it. So sounds pretty easy and delicious. That didn't take long at all. Isn't that pretty? I have no idea if the colors will retain or look as nice once they're canned and everything, but I think it looks very nice and the taste will be nice. So it says 6 cups of onion. That's a lot of onion to me, so I don't know. I'll do the same thing. I'm going to chop them all up. It's 8 pounds of onion, 8 pounds of tomato. So they have to be chopped up, but I'm going to wait after the onions because they're going to be messy to chop. So I'm going to do the onions, but I don't know if I'm going to do 6 cups. To me, that's a lot of onion. And these are very, very strong. So I might cry. Okay, this is 4 cups of onion. I think I'm going to start with that. And when I taste it as I go along, if I feel it needs more, I'll add more. But that's, to me, enough of onion for now. So I have my ground beef. I'm going to add that. I was just letting it strain. In that goes. I didn't plan this well because the dishwasher's full. And I already have a sink full of dishes again. The dishwasher's running, but I already have a sink full of dishes again. All right, so now I'm just going to chop the tomatoes. So I'm using all paste tomatoes. Most of our slicers are finished now. At this point, it's just paste tomatoes and cherry tomatoes. The cherry tomatoes are still going strong. All right, that's it for the tomatoes. You know, the only thing left to chop, which I should have done before the tomatoes, was the garlic, but that just takes a second. And I do have tomato juice here, so I'm going to add that too. And I'll just get the garlic. We need 3 cloves of garlic. This is our homegrown garlic that I still have hanging downstairs. I haven't done anything with it yet. I want to tilt it. I'll bring the camera in a minute, but I want to show you how beautiful this is and how good it smells. And I haven't even added anything yet. All I've put in is the ground beef, the tomatoes, peppers, and onions. It looks delicious. It smells delicious already. So now we add, it says a quart of chicken stock. The recipe actually said 2 pounds of ground meat. So I used ground beef. So I'm going to use beef stock. I guess depending on what ground meat you use, you would use the stock according to that, but I use ground beef, so I'm going to use beef stock. So I did mine. Oh, you know what? I had a quart. I did some in quarts. I could have just opened a quart. Oh well. So 2 pints equals a quart. So I'm going to put in a quart of beef stock. I'm running out of room behind me. Because I did some stock in quarts and I find we don't use it as much as we open the pints. So it would have been a perfect opportunity to use a quart. And we need a 1/4 cup of sugar. I'm using organic, but any sugar will do. And I'm sure this is to help with the acidity of the tomatoes and for flavor. So a 1/4 cup. I'm cheating. I'm looking at the recipe. And 1/2 cup of cider vinegar. That's to make it safe for canning and for flavor. How much? 1/2 cup. I have a big one of these that I just keep filling this little guy because I find when I pour it, I'm always over pouring. So I keep putting it in this little guy. Okay. Stock, onion, peppers, tomatoes, ground meat, garlic, sugar, cider. It says cayenne pepper to taste. Well, I'm not doing that because we don't do spice. It says kosher salt and pepper to taste. And tomato powder. So I'm guessing that's to thicken it. And I also have tomato paste if I want. Oh, I vacuum sealed this. So I'm going to put a bit of the tomato powder to thicken it, also for extra flavor. And if I find it needs it, I'll put the tomato paste in as well. And I guess I'll start with like about a tablespoon of kosher salt. And my ground peppers all here. I have to grind more. That's all I have. I don't know. I guess I'll do about a teaspoon. I'm sure it's going to need more salt. So we're going to turn this up to about 300, 350 and just let it cook for about 20, 30 minutes. And then I'll taste it to adjust the seasonings. And then it's ready for canning if I'm happy with the seasoning. Now I'm picturing it. This is supposed to be a soup. So I could be adding more liquid because it looks quite thick. I'm going to let you see it in just a second. And when it cans, it's going to get even thicker. So I have a tomato juice here that I canned yesterday. And I'm debating, do I want it more like a real soup? Because there's no rice in this, like how you would for if you were having like a stuffed pepper. So if I were to serve this, I would want it thicker and I would probably serve it over rice. Or would I warm it up like soup and add rice into it while it's warming up and have it like a real soup? So I have to decide. And I'm also thinking I might do a couple of jars, like just 2 jars, like kind of rebel canning, and put like just a bit of dry rice in the jars and see how that goes. All right, well, first of all, I'm going to let it cook a bit to get the flavors, and then I'll decide if I want it like something thick just to serve over rice and have it more like a meal thing, or thin it out so when we cook, warm it up as a soup and add rice in it that way. Smells absolutely delicious. All right, I'll give it some thought. Okay, I had Frank come in. We both tasted it, and it's one of the best soups I've ever made. The taste is fantastic, but I know I said before I would show you it, and I didn't. I forgot, but I will show you it now before I add what I'm going to add. I only added a half a tablespoon more of kosher salt, not regular salt. So when you use kosher salt, you're really not adding as much salt as regular salt. I didn't add anything else, but it's quite thick. So what I'm going to do is this batch, I already know I'm going to make another batch. It's that good, and Frank loves it. And in the winter, he loves nothing more than to open a jar of soup for lunch or whatever. So instead of having to decide if I make it into a true soup or just to serve it over rice, and because I said this was a soup for you guys, I'm going to keep it as a soup. I'm going to add more liquid. And my next batch, I'm going to make it thicker. And that one will serve like over a bowl of rice. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add, I don't know how much yet. I'm going to wing it and see. I'm going to add a bit more beef broth. And I'm going to add some tomato juice to thin it out a bit. So let me show you now what it looks like, and then I'm going to show you what it looks like when I add the extra liquid. So this is what it looks like now before I add any extra liquid. So if I took a scoop of this to put into the jar, and it's going to thicken a bit as it goes in the canner, there's not going to be much liquid left. Oh, aren't the colors beautiful? So now I'm going to add a bit more liquid, and I'll figure out how much more without like changing the taste too much. That's what I'm afraid of, is changing the taste. So I'll do about like a pint of that. Maybe that much of the beef broth. And now it's much better. So I'm just going to give it 5 minutes like this. Taste it, and then hopefully I can can it then. Okay, this is what it looks like now. I know it doesn't seem much of a difference, but there is a lot more liquid in it. So just for 2 jars, and I'm going to do it on the first 2, I have some organic brown rice here. I'm going to put about a tablespoon of rice on the bottom. Now this recipe, you leave an inch of headspace, but since I'm, excuse me, going to add the rice, and that's going to swell as it cooks, I'm going to leave more of a headspace just for these 2 jars. This is rebel canning, so if you're not comfortable doing it, I just want to see how it'll be like this. Probably just like that. I don't think it's going to give me the amount the recipe said, but I could be wrong. I'm not a good judge of that at all. But I put my tall canner there, the double decker. Whoops, too much. Fingertip tight. I got exactly 14 pints with adding the extra liquid. So I think it called for 7 or 8 quarts. So not bad, considering a lot of recipes don't come near that. So these process for pints are 75 minutes. Quarts, I think, are 90. And I will link the recipe down below and everything. And Frank's going to babysit I'll put it on in a second. It makes noise. Frank's going to babysit the canner for me. I'm going to go sit down for a bit and I'll show you them when they come out. And my house smells like a delicious restaurant. Best recipe ever. All right, I'm going to show you something that isn't pretty. A jar exploded in the canner. It looks like something vomited in there. This has never happened to me. I've had jars break. I have never had a jar explode. Like the lid is off. I don't know if I didn't tighten it right or what, but I'm going to empty it, but nothing looks very pretty. I've never had that happen, ever. So I don't know. They're all going to look horrible and disgusting now because they have all the ingredients of that jar all over them, but every other jar seems okay. The canner looks horrible. But I will always show you everything, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Other than that, I was going to tell you that that was the most fun and excited I have been for canning in a while because I just love this recipe so much. But all I have to do is tomorrow wipe off the jars, clean them up, and you'd never know anything happened. It's just a shame that that happened. I don't know. I guess I didn't tighten the lid or I tightened it too much. I don't know. I've had jars break. I've never had one explode. So that's new for me. Anyway, it's a delicious recipe. I'm going to make it again tomorrow, and that'll help use up some of the peppers. So I hope this was fun for you, and I hope you give it a try. And it's late. We haven't even had supper yet, so Frank's going to work on that now. And thanks so much for hanging out in the kitchen with me. And until we're together again, take care.